This is your City Council Roundup, a recap of what's happening at City Hall with John Ongaro. The views expressed in this program are solely of those of the host and not necessarily those of the radio station or its partners.
If you watched Council last night and thought to yourself, probably not much of a City Council Roundup for tomorrow morning, then you didn't watch long enough, because there is something that we need to talk about that happened in the last part of the meeting last night that is beyond disturbing, and we'll get into it. But first, last night, the biggest report of the night came from the Tourism Department and the CEDC. The Tourism Development Fund and the MAT tax is a $9 million tourism event impact. That's a big deal. Revenues in 2023 were just over $3 million from the MAT tax. That's your friends and your family and maybe even you spending a couple % extra on your hotel rooms that goes into a fund. $3 million, $1.5 million of that goes to the CEDC. The other $1.5 million goes to tourism to do things. What kind of things, you might ask? Well, the report last night showed all kinds of things and a great list of 30 different events that was funded by this cash, which is great because that's exactly what it's for. However, you know how I am when it comes to tourism, and I know that I'm not a very popular person in the tourism department, and I'm okay with that because I just have questions. And one of the questions that I have is, well, you know, this money that we're spending on 22 travel media visits and 60 content pieces created about the city of Thunder Bay, can somebody show me where those things are so we could look at them, so locals can look at them too? Or is this just digital property somewhere else and content somewhere else that we're paying for hotel rooms and flights for bloggers to come and visit? If that's the case, God bless you. I'd love to see those. We should do a better job of sharing those. 4 motion picture crews and 6 location scouts were supported. I don't know what supported means. It could mean that the hotel was covered. It could mean that maybe their flights were covered. I don't know. But 4 motion picture crews, you never know. These are the kinds of things that come up at the tourism update all the time, and the money is well spent. I am not going to deny that the money is well spent on especially these great events that they do support. Things like the Festival of India and the Buskers Festival and Wake the Giant and the Martial Arts and Health Expo and the Robbins Minor Hockey Classic. All of these things get money from that MAT tax, and that is a good thing. So keep up the good work. Also last night on the agenda was the quick summary of remuneration and expenses paid to councils and council appointees in 2023. That's right, kids. Their salaries.
Oh, I love this.
And I know it's Danny's favorite part.
Yes.
In case you were wondering, the mayor last year made $120,065. $6,500 of that came from boards and other bodies. The rest of the councilors made $46,000. Some of them made a little more because they sat on councils or sat on boards or other bodies that pay stipend, but on average about $46,276. That doesn't mean that's how much they, just so you know, their salary is not that much.
Right.
This is the total remuneration that goes with the other boards and bodies that they're on. In total, the city council the cash that we pay to city council every year is $698,966. Then you thought the meeting was over at 8:31, and it was not. Excuse me while I take a drink.
No problem.
I've been saying this for 5 years. If you watch these council meetings and you don't think there's tension in the room, you are wrong.
No.
And I'm telling you right now, with the amount of big decisions that we have to make in the coming year or two, this council better start getting along. Because last night, in the city council portion, Hillcourt Estates came up again. You remember that city administration asked for a 1-year deferral on selling or keeping Hillcourt Estates. This is the trailer park that the city owns. We make about $100,000 in revenue a year off of it. It's a lovely community. It's been there for a long time. We are not in the business of being landlords, but in this case, we are. On that night, on March 11th, the vote was 8-2 to remove Hillcourt Estates from the outstanding items list. Therefore, not selling it, not doing anything with it, just taking it off the list. The vote was 8-2. You notice that 8 plus 2 is 10. That means 3 people were missing. Well, there was some procedural issues with this, and I am not even going to attempt to try to explain this to you because 3 times I hit rewind to try to understand what the heck they were talking about. It turns out that in the procedural bylaws, when you make a decision like this, you can't have an amendment that is contrary to the original motion, which means that you can change it, but you can't ask for the opposite. Apparently, that's what was done that night.
No.
However,
Okay.
Councillor Gertuga brought it to the floor and explained that he called the clerk. And the clerk and him had, quote, spirited conversations. That's what the clerk said. And that they disagree with the interpretation of what happened that night. Now, this is not that big of a deal. There was a vote. It was 8-2. Move on. But Councillor Gertuga found issue with how this procedure was in play. Are you following me?
I am. It's
Okay.
just like
The issue is he didn't agree that it should have been taken off the outstanding list because of procedural bylaws that are in play, which he cited to council and the clerk. I am going to go on record one more time. In my opinion, which is not really that valid, but in my opinion, the clerk, Krista Power, is, in my opinion, the smartest person in the room. She is somebody that knows the book of municipal acts like the back of her hand and then some. To question the integrity of what she does and to question her interpretation of how things are unfolding is a really bad idea. That's my opinion. However, Councillor Gertuga did not agree with the clerk's interpretation of what happened on March 11th, which was the changing of the outstanding items. Let's keep in mind what we're talking about.
trying to keep a scorecard here.
And this is where it started.
All right.
This is how Councillor Gertuga would like to take care of the fact that him and the clerk do not agree.
Your Worship?
Yes.
What is the process? I know, council, we have an integrity commissioner. If we want to complain or contest or oppose a ruling, what is the process? Seeing as the clerk's office reports directly to council. This isn't a personality issue. It's a black and white issue that if people can't read on page 2, where it says it's completely contrary, I don't understand it. It's just been here 23 years and I've never seen anything so ridiculous. But what is the process for council? Like if I believe that this is totally against our procedural bylaw and I want to take this further, is it integrity commissioner or who do I talk to?
Clerk Power.
Certainly. Your Worship, should the member have a concern with the interpretation that the city clerk has provided, it's important to note that city council appoints your city clerk. I am a statutory officer under the legislation. I do in fact report to you. Council appoints me. Council can also dismiss me. That is available to city council. It's also important to note that I am subject to the employee code of conduct. You can certainly speak to city manager Gail, who would then manage any sort of matter with council, again, as I am a statutory officer. That is the procedure that would be available for you.
So in other words,
Wow.
if you have a problem with me, counselor, you're my boss. Now, questioning the clerk on her interpretation of a procedural bylaw is a terrible idea. That would be like you telling a pilot how to fly a plane. It's not your place to do that. Well, that was just the beginning. Councillor Gertuga took exception to some of the back and forth that then happened throughout the meeting, and this kept going, but I thought it was important that this next piece of the meeting was brought to the public, and I will tell you right now, this is something you will not hear in the city's podcast tomorrow. I guarantee you on this. But this is the kind of decorum that is falling apart in that room.
Councillor Gertuga.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, it's been stated a few times that this was just for information by the city clerk. No, it wasn't. It was for a recommendation and a resolution on whether we sell or not. Administration has done some of this work already. We've been told that. So it wasn't just for administration. It was for a decision on a recommendation. Do we sell or do we keep it? So it's not that it was for information. It was keep bringing them back, keeps getting brought up. brought up, and it's irritating. And it's, it was a material decision of council. We vote to receive reports on stuff all the time, and if we're talking about, we want to concentrate on the housing issue, that's why administration came back and said we would need a year, because we need to concentrate. They didn't say we want to delete it completely, we need 2 years. They said we need a year. So don't get this clouded up and muddied up with our housing initiatives. That's why they brought it forward. And as Councillor Benson said, and it's also stated that it was vetted through legal. No, it wasn't vetted through legal before that night. So that was wrong, Councillor Oliver. It wasn't vetted through legal, and I want that to be brought out to the just publicly. And it's funny, it's you have how many people here, with over 100 years experience, and we have 4. The dissenters are new councillors. Some of them, some I see fall asleep half the time.
Order.
So you have 4 new councillors that are descendants of the rest of the councillor that are, in his opinion, causing the trouble. Maybe that's why we have 4 new councillors, Councillor Gertuga, to keep you in check and to keep the rest of council in check. And so just because the 4 new councillors, who apparently, in your opinion, fall asleep half the time, are not agreeing with what you're saying, this is not a bad thing. Councillor Pascalino took some exception to that.
Term which I'm not going to use here, but a lot of times there's been basically people say they have legal representation, but it turns out to be basically somebody from a bar somewhere that maybe took a course in something in law or said he did. But anyways, I really do appreciate the work that the clerk's department does here. I think that whether you're a new city councillor or whether you are a city councillor who's been here for a really long time, you have 1 vote, and I think that has to be respected as well. But the mudslinging that happens sometimes in here is disturbing.
So now we have a divided council of 4 new councillors that are disagreeing with the process, especially in defending the clerk. They are defending the clerk because the clerk, I'm going to guarantee you, has saved their bacon more than once because she's an expert on these kinds of things. If you disagree on how she interprets these things, there's a process, but you're not going to beat the process. Go ahead.
My question is, and I didn't watch it last night.
You should have. The
last
hour
of all the
was
nights
something
I
else.
missed.
It gets better, by the way.
Okay, so quickly to me, everything you're sharing here this morning is telling me this kind of stuff needs to be played out in the public?
Yeah, there you go.
Do you know what I mean? Like, why is it all like that's hard to listen to.
Funny you should say that. Councillor Chung agrees with you.
This conversation around the table tonight has been quite disappointing. It's really discouraging to hear how administration has been treated this evening. I think much of this conversation could have been had offline, and to call out the city clerk and ask what the process was for essentially a reprimand, I think is inexcusable around this table. To the issue at hand, I think the conversation we had the night that we made the decision to remove.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people around the table are taking some of the commentary as attacks on administration rather than the process and the decision making around this table. So I would like to isolate administration from any types of comments that could have been taken in a bad way. It's directed around the decision making of this table.
It's interesting that Councillor Benz brings that up now, but did not speak up for when that was said earlier against the clerk's office.
She has a point there that you had an opportunity to defend the clerk. But what Councillor Benz is saying is that there's a question on the process, not a question on the clerk herself. However, earlier in the meeting, the discussion was, well, you're interpreting it wrong. Okay. You can have debates and disagreements. That's why we pay you the $46,000 to be there. However, when you're questioning the integrity of somebody, that's when I get my backup. At the same time, calling out 4 new councillors for being different and for coming up with another vote that you don't agree with, Councillor Pascalino said it best. My vote is worth just as much as yours is, and that's why we're there. So here's what happened next. Now we've got this divided council, okay? We're now fighting about the deferral from administration about Hillcourt Estates, deferring it for a year. That's the thing in question. Are you following me? So we have to have a vote on that one thing that Councillor Kachuga decided to take out of the minutes. So there was a vote. Of course, it's a recorded vote because you got to see who's on which side. And of course, it's a tie. And therefore, the vote loses to take it out. Okay? So back to the original motion, which was the city deferring for a year. We got to vote again. Well, wait a minute. Councillor Johnson, that's right. He said something last night. He had an idea. Here's an idea. Let's change administration's focus from deferring it to a year to deferring it to 2 years.
Oh.
What?
Okay.
Well, that quickly went to another recorded vote, and it lost. So now we're back to the original request from administration to defer for a year, and we all voted, and guess what happened? They said yes. And so we're back to the original motion. Approved. Hillcrest Court Estates. We'll talk about it a year from now.
A year from now.
But we spent almost an hour fighting over procedures and questioning the direction of the clerk, which I have a big problem with. I am not an expert. Good leaders and smart people surround themselves with people who are smarter than them. Council, you have those people in the room with you. One of them happens to be the clerk. Questioning that stuff is crazy. But the whole point of me showing you these clips and bringing these clips to you is this. This is the kind of bickering that's going on behind the scenes. If somebody tells you it's not happening, they are not telling you the truth. I have from my sources that these kinds of heated discussions happen all the time, offline. But these are the people that you vote for to make important decisions, and they need to start getting on the same page. This council is not on the same page with anything. You have, thank God, Victoriaville coming down this year. But now you've got a turf facility in front of you and a new police station and all kinds of other major decisions that need to be made that affect your pocketbook every single day. And these 13 people can't get along like a bunch of 5-year-olds. We need to start working together. So if you're using the city council meeting time as the only time that you're talking about things and talking about these issues and not having these conversations offline so that when you're in front of the public, the optics, councillors, are everything. Who you get along with and who you don't get along with is none of our business. When you bring it to council with these kinds of fights, now it's our business, and now we have questions on who's doing what for who.
I also think this feature this morning has brought new conversation about what happened last night. And I'm sure it's going to be talked about today.
For sure.
John, you think they went for beers after
I don't
the
think
meeting?
so. At the end of the day, we went all through this back and forth to actually go back to the original decision by council, by the administration, or the motion from the administration. We went back to the same thing, but we needed to air our dirty laundry for an hour first. This is the kind of stuff that makes me very nervous about the big decisions that are to come. You need to start getting together, and you're not. So that's what happened at council last night. Danny?
Thank you, John. That's your council roundup for Tuesday, March 26th. Another reminder, this will be available to you on our website for you to review, and something new, which is great. You can also text the word council to our T-Bay Tel Talkin text line 807-344-8229. That will give you an automatic link. That should be up in the next half hour or so. John, thanks for your time today and your insight on this. Wow, that was an intense moment. Intense moments last night. Thank you.
We take a break next week. They can all have a relax.
Oh, okay, that's good. All right.